Good morning. My name is Shirar O'Connor. I'm one of the founding partners of Underpinned. We are a New York-based economic development and foreign direct investment consulting firm. We've been working with Landbruksskun on a research project focusing on EIPs, or eco-industrial parks. So I'm here today to talk a bit about some of the research findings we uncovered during the process and to highlight some of the more key features of the research. The name of our presentation today is The Future of Icelandic Industry and Eco-Industrial Park Imperative. It is an imperative, and this is a movement that's very important to the future of Iceland's industrial parks and industrial real estate, corporate real estate even, proposition. So this is the future of the way that business is going to be done. It's the future of the way real estate, commercial real estate is going to be situated and formatted. So this is a very important movement. And hopefully my presentation sheds a little bit of light about what it's all about, what the possibilities are, and what some of the hurdles are. First, starting off, what is an EIP? The common definition of an eco-industrial park is a community of businesses that cooperate with each other and with the local community to efficiently share resources. This is also called industrial symbiosis, or co-location. There's lots of different terms for what an EIP does. The fundamental principles of the circular economy, or an EIP, are one, to design waste and pollution out of the equation, to keep products and materials in use, and to regenerate natural systems. As I mentioned, there are a lot of terms to describe what is done at an EIP. The glossary for this industry is very long. There doesn't seem to be much consensus on a strict definition or vocabulary. So it's kind of all over the place. But one of the things that we've found is that the World Bank and UNIDO are working to put more structure around this industry, to define it better, to put together standards, global standards, and sort of package and organize the EIP ecosystem much more efficiently and effectively and clearly. So going back to, sort of what these are, if you want to really distill it and simplify it, there are two types of EIPs. There are greenfield EIPs, and this is what's happening in Iceland. This is the movement there to build for purpose industrial parks that from the get-go, as they come out of the ground, are built and designed to be highly sustainable. The other version or category are the brownfield EIPs, and this is the most common and sort of traditional types of these parks. These are traditional industrial parks that have been retrofitted over time to be more sustainable and to be more integrated and networked with each other to share resources. So the greenfield EIP and brownfield EIPs are the most common types of these parks. It all started here in Kalundborg in Denmark, which is widely recognized as being the original eco-industrial park. It began in the early 70s, and I can tell you that we cannot find one piece of research or one case study that doesn't mention this. It's everywhere. This is the sort of the grandfather of all EIPs, and it is mentioned in almost every citation that we have come across. And what makes it so interesting is the way they approached it. And this is the model that the rest of the world is really following. To give you a couple of examples, their power station, the surplus heat that's generated from their coal-fired power plant, is used to heat homes. Nearby fish farms that have a refuse sludge is sold as fertilizer. Steam from the power plant is sold to a pharmaceutical company and enzyme manufacturer. And the byproducts of the of the power plant. One of the byproducts is sulfur dioxide, which contains gypsum, which is sold to sheetrock manufacturers, and the use of producing sheetrock. And what was interesting about this particular case study is the fact that these manufacturers do not have to import or purchase any additional gypsum. They use all their natural resources come from the byproducts of this power plant, which, you know, again, look at this, the savings in the carbon footprint. They're not, you know, there's no shipping of, you know, or importing this gypsum. So there's economies of scale here. There's cost savings. Of course, there's a environmental aspect of this. It's a win-win situation. So to give you, you know, just an overview of EIPs and what's going on. So they have been in existence and really a thing since, you know, the early 70s. In a lot of times they came into existence as a reaction by government to reduce pollution and environmental impact of industrial waste. In Asia, especially, there were some very big issues with health and well-being of their citizens. In Japan and China, for example, that Japan and China were highly industrialized very quickly. There weren't many EPA or environmental protection mandates put in place. So there was a huge issue with, you know, industrial waste and the toxic effects of those industrial waste, not only on the people, but also the environment. So out of necessity, Japan and China began really doubling down on these eco-industrial parks. It formed a lot of policy incentives. It was a strategic priority of their governments to get these sites cleaned up and get them on the right track. So the main drivers and benefits for eco-industrial parks are really reducing operating costs and improving productivity, but also greening the supply chains, mitigating climate change, of course, improving resource supply security. So think about it, you know, that gypsum that the sheetrock manufacturer was producing in COVID, our supply chains were disrupted. So imagine if you had a local supplier that, you know, and you didn't have to rely on the supply chain, you know, this vast supply chain to get your raw materials. So there is improved, you know, a risk scenario here, which is very valuable to companies, especially, you know, with complex supply chains and when there's supply chain issues. One of the economic benefits, you know, beyond the environmental aspects of this, it's an employment creator, job creator, direct and indirect jobs, the cost savings due to the reduction of the waste disposal and energy consumption, all those things. Also, eco-industrial parks have higher amounts of foreign direct investment in them, so that's a benefit. And the long-term economics, you know, sustainability of the park and the companies, there's direct benefit there. Also on the talent side, to man these processes and these EIPs, there's a need to upskill and upgrade training for staff. So, you know, there's a definite economic impact from that perspective, from a wage perspective. One of the examples I wanted to share, because I thought these diagrams illustrated this perfectly. This is South Korea. And starting in 2005, they began to really tackle their EIP and problem and doubled down. The government really doubled down on pushing this agenda, the EIP agenda. So they took their industrial parks, they began retrofitting all the processes to reduce emissions and, you know, and waste from their companies. They began to network them. And if you see over time, over the course of 15 years, you know, they went from, you know, regional networks of the companies exchanging natural resources to, you know, forming this nationwide network where companies, who are farther away were sharing natural resources, their waste resources. So it became this network and this web of cooperation and partnership, which is still evolving, but they've done a wonderful job of doing this. And one of the things that we found in our research was that the smaller the company, the more efficient and effective these networks were. Obviously, distance, it hinders communication. So it makes sense when you're in closer proximity that you can find a company that has, waste that you can use as a resource. So it works much more effectively. The characteristics of a successful EIP, obviously planning with the environment in mind. Iceland is one step ahead of everyone else in that you have 100% renewable energy. The buildings should be optimized. The architecture and the materials and everything that are used for design should be optimized. I think that, this is happening more and more, especially with newly, built for purpose EIPs. And this is an area where Iceland's going to have a competitive advantage. So there's certain things that, you should think about when you're doing this. And one of them is that there's no perfect EIP. Perfection doesn't exist in this equation because it's always evolving. Technology is evolving, processes are evolving. So I think if you, do what your best, don't, you're never going to reach perfection. But if you can tackle different elements of your EIP, whether it's how the people get to work, if you can reduce emissions or optimize that from a sustainability perspective, or even the cantina, making sure that you recycle all the refuse in some way, optimize every point of the EIP, you'll get closer to having, a perfect symbiosis there. You're never going to use all of the refuse 100% of the time, but you can use quite a bit of it and optimize things. So EIPs don't work without collaboration. And this is, I think, the most important slide that we're going to be talking about today. It is all about collaboration and partnerships and networks. Government is so important and plays a very important role, the national government, in this whole process. They set policy, they incentivize companies that locate in an EIP. They set KPIs and standards. I mentioned that there are no global standards right now, so a good place to start is with your national environmental protection standards. And then you work your way up from there. If you can improve on those are your metrics, those are your KPIs, here's the baseline standard and improving on those. The national government will also be very, I think, important to the business development process of these. Local government is also an integral partner from business development. They're potentially co-managing the sites. They're convener of companies, so they play an important role, as does the developer and the EIP management company themselves. Obviously, with operations, business development, helping to create the networks between the companies. The private sector themselves, the companies actually locating there, are very important to networking, collaboration. Their commitment is very important. And they're also going to help in an ancillary way with the business development, because as they're creating their networks with other companies, they might have a waste product that is very valuable to another company, enough so that the company would co-locate with them to have access to this asset. So they'll play a role in that as well. And one of the areas that I believe wasn't really in the research we found, really wasn't stressed enough, was academia and the universities. I think from Iceland's perspective, you're going to want to tap into your universities to help with mapping. So finding all of your industries and, your companies across Iceland and what they do, what their byproducts are, and then helping to match with other companies. So this is a heavy piece of research and analysis. You have to understand the chemical processes. They're also going to help with metrics and KPI tracking. How many connections do they make? How much waste is being reused? What are the efficiency levels? And they're also going to be very important to convening the companies. So a very important partner, I think, are the universities. So, how do you start an EIP? And you'll hear this word over and over again. EIPs begin and end with collaboration, communication, and partnerships. They have to be supported by government in the form of legislation, tax breaks, and financial incentives. Public support is very important. There is an eco imperative. And again, I think you have an advantage in Iceland because you have a eco mindset. The people of Iceland have this eco mindset already. So there's going to be a lot of local support. But it's all about networking, it's about relationships, and it's about making sure these companies connect and share their resources. So how will the EIP benefit the economy and how do you market it? So, I mentioned earlier that they help facilitate foreign direct investment. The companies will get involved to make connections. They'll help market it themselves. And your job will be to create and facilitate the collaboration and networking opportunities, which will in turn, generate business development opportunities for you. I think it benefits the economy because it reduces the need to import raw materials. And, you would market it also like any other industrial park or industrial site, using your networks of consultants, site consultants, and also targeting specific trade shows and things. So it's not very different from that standpoint. I want to thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions that anyone has, and watching how you progress with this EIP journey. I think it's definitely the way to go. It's the future, and we're really excited to see what Iceland does with this concept.